Hi, Peter Charles here, Folks for Life Fly Fishing. And today let's talk about catching walleye on the fly. Now, in the past, I haven't targeted walleye very often, but I have caught quite a few, usually when fishing for steelhead in the winter. And what these walleye have done, if they've migrated out of Lake Erie, up the Grand River, and we're getting them below the Caledonia Dam. And we do quite well. You know, you can hit quite a few, actually, when you're fishing for steelhead. They're holding in the same sort of spots that steelhead do. These slow pools, you know, they're resting. They're not as strong a swimmer as a steelhead, so they look for deeper, slower holes to hang in. So you often find steelhead in those holes as well. So when I'm swinging a fly for a steelhead, bang, I get a walleye. I've also targeted them deliberately in the summer in rivers. And what I've found there is the river type of feature they want is they want really slow, deep water. And stained preferably, as opposed to clear. They don't want dirty. They don't feed as well for dirty, but after the water clears, if you've had a heavy rainstorm and it gets dirty, after the water starts to clear, that's often the best time to go fishing for them. The type of things of water I've fished in the past was one river up north in particular I can think of where it was almost like a series of small interconnected lakes. It's actually one river. They don't call it lakes, but it's like a lake and a neck and a lake and a neck and a lake and a neck. And every outflow of one of those necks would hold walleye. The water would be 10, 15, 20 foot deep depending on where you were. And you can pretty well be assured of catching a few walleye in those spots. And they will be hanging below the current in the softer, deeper water. The other thing to think about when you're dealing with fast currents is that sometimes the fast currents are just in the top part of the water column, and the water below can actually be quite slow moving. It can actually be going in the opposite direction. So you can find walleye under these fast currents quite often just because the water there isn't moving very fast. It's deep, it's got cover because of the fast water over their heads, and they're always going to be looking for cover or structure. So that, you know, don't overlook those just because the water looks fast. The water underneath them may be quite slow. So let's take a look at the tackle I've been using when I've been going out and deliberately targeting walleye as opposed to the ones I catch when going for steelhead. Probably the most important part of the equation is the line, and this is an Airflow Streamer Max full sinker. And the reason why I particularly like this line, as you can see the orange here, that's the running line and it floats. And for river fishing, we want a full sinker with a floating running line, because if we're stripping a line back and that running line is going in the water, you don't want it to sink, because if it sinks, you get into a lot of trouble. So the Streamer Max gets away from that problem by having the floating running line. It also has an intermediate belly, which makes it a bit more controllable, and it gives us this nice drooping effect. So if you want, let's say, for it to jig the fly for walleye, being able to, it'll do it for you. As you strip, your fly will be doing this. So it's kind of cool. I've used this line a lot in Lake Erie and in river fishing, and I've caught a lot of fish on it. I also use it for striped bass in Cape Cod. So let's take a look at the flies. Well, of course, a typical one would be the clouser. It's just like a bucktail jig in conventional fishing. Think of what they use for walleye in conventional fishing. I mean, if you really haven't targeted walleye before in the fly and you're concerned about methods and locations, study the conventional anglers. Look at the stuff they use. And they're using bucktail jigs. There we go, clouser. You got it covered. They also catch them on things like rapidas and soft plastic baits that look like minnows. And there's my, you know, black-nosed day swimmer. Caught a bunch on these too, and also on my brown trout weimer as well. So minnow patterns, realistic looking minnow patterns. If the water is really off-colored, that's the time to go with really bright lure type streamers. Mickey fins and things like that, you know, really bright yellows and reds and pinks. That works in really heavily stained water. But when the water's somewhat clear, like, you know, got a few feet of visibility, then go with something that's more realistic. And in the really slow pools, where you really want to imitate the soft plastics, you might look at my headstander pattern. Now, I have not actually used this headstander yet for walleye. I will get out and give it a try one of these days. But it has the ability to sit like this in soft currents. And in slow water in the lake, for example, it'll sit like this. And then it'll jig up and then back down again. It's a dynamite walleye presentation that conventional anglers use all of the time with soft plastics. So your fly choice is important and your line choice is important. You've got to get down. You've got to be able to get down in really slow pools, deep pools. You've got to be able to get down 10, 15 feet at least in a lot of these pools. And you're not going to do it with a sink tip. So don't waste your time trying with a sink tip. It's not going to work. You're going to need a full sinker like this line. And as I say, if you're picking a full sinker, whatever brand it is, and if you're fishing rivers, go with the floating running line. It's very important. Otherwise, you're going to end up with your sinking running line in the water. When you try to make a cast, it won't come out of the water, and it snags up on weeds and rocks. And blech. Get a floating running line. And if you've not fished full sinkers before, I've got videos on full sinkers. They aren't the beast that people make them out to be. They just take a few little things that you have to know, and they're highly effective fishing tools. My very, very first fish I caught, on a fly, which was somewhere around about 1970 or 69, 70, was a smallmouth bass caught on a level full sinking line. I mean, if you want to fish for bass and walleye and pike in deeper water, you have to be using a full sinker. You can't get away from it. So you might as well get used to using those lines right now. And as I say, the Streamer Max Plus is an excellent choice because of the intermediate belly, and the floating running line makes for this lovely drooping effect, and you can get a nice jig as you pull the fly back. So that's the basics of walleye on the fly, and I'll just finish it off by saying, pay attention to the conventional anglers. I spend a lot of time looking at what those guys do for walleye and bass, because a lot of their techniques can be replicated with fly fishing. So give it a try. Cheers.